He looked like the quiet neighbor, the kind of guy who'd hold the elevator door for you, maybe smile awkwardly, keep to himself. But behind Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment door in Milwaukee, there was hell. What unfolded inside that one-bedroom apartment would go on to shock the world as one of the most horrifying crime stories in modern history. But before we step into that nightmare, we have to go back to understand how this monster was created. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 24, 1960. From the outside, his early life seemed almost ordinary, but there were cracks in the surface even as a child. He was a shy, withdrawn boy, raised in a home marked by frequent arguments between his parents and long periods of emotional neglect. Dahmer's fascination with death didn't begin in adulthood. It started with roadkill. He would collect dead animals, dissect them, and store their remains in jars. He wasn't just curious, he was obsessed. He later admitted that he wanted to see what they looked like inside. At the age of 14, Dahmer began having fantasies, violent, graphic ones, of dominating and controlling another person completely. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. His fantasy life was dark and it kept getting darker, but no one noticed. No one stopped him, and no one imagined what he would one day become. His first murder came in 1978. Dahmer was just 18 years old. It wasn't premeditated, or so he claimed. He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks, brought him home, and after hours of drinking and talking, Dahmer didn't want him to leave. So, he killed him, a dumbbell to the head. Then he dismembered the body, crushed the bones with a sledgehammer, and scattered the remains in the woods. For nearly a decade after that, Dahmer didn't kill again, or at least he didn't get caught. But by the late 1980s, something inside him broke completely. He moved to Milwaukee, and the murders resumed. Only now they were more frequent, more calculated, and far more disturbing. He wasn't just killing, he was experimenting, trying to turn his victims into mindless, obedient partners by drilling holes in their skulls and injecting acid into their brains. He called them his zombies. Most died within hours. At the same time, Dahmer was hiding in plain sight. He worked at a chocolate factory. He greeted neighbors. He even offered sandwiches to people in the building. Sandwiches that some now fear may have contained human remains. His victims were often young, vulnerable men, many from marginalized communities. Dahmer used kindness and charm to lure them in. Then he drugged them, killed them, and preserved their body parts like trophies. But it wasn't just the violence that horrified the world. It was the cold, calculated way he operated. Dahmer kept skulls in his closet, a full human skeleton. In his bedroom, a freezer with hearts, biceps, and livers neatly wrapped, photographs of dismembered corpses, a severed head in the fridge. When police finally entered his apartment in July 1991, they weren't just entering a crime scene, they were stepping into a haunted museum of horror. And this wasn't the work of a deranged madman operating in a blind rage. This was a man who planned every step, documented every moment, and often returned to the remains for pleasure. But even as the evidence piled up, people couldn't understand it. How did someone so normal become this thing? Was he born evil, or did something snap? Dahmer himself said he wasn't insane. He knew what he was doing. He said he simply lacked control and the desire to stop. The most chilling part? He admitted that he derived joy from killing. It made him feel powerful, godlike. He didn't just want to end lives, he wanted to own them completely. The irony is that Dahmer had many opportunities to be stopped. He was arrested multiple times for sexual misconduct, public indecency, and even drugging a teenage boy. But somehow he kept slipping through the cracks. At one point, a 14-year-old victim actually escaped the apartment, naked, drugged, bleeding. But when the police arrived, Dahmer calmly told them it was just a lover's quarrel, and they let him go. They handed the boy back to his killer. That boy died hours later. By the time Dahmer was finally caught, 17 lives had been destroyed, and yet he showed little remorse. "I should have been dead years ago," he said in interviews. "I created this horror, and it only makes sense I do everything to put an end to it." But did he regret it? Or did he just regret getting caught? What turned Jeffrey Dahmer from a quiet, awkward teenager into a sadistic killer who butchered people without remorse? Was it nature, nurture, or something darker? Something none of us can ever fully explain? One thing is certain. The story of Jeffrey Dahmer isn't just a crime tale. It's a psychological horror that forces us to look at the darkest corners of the human mind and realize that monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes they smile at you in the hallway. It all came crashing down on the night of July 22, 1991. Jeffrey Dahmer, now 31 years old, invited another young man into his apartment. But this time, something went wrong. The man, 32-year-old Tracy Edwards, sensed danger. He noticed the overpowering stench, the strange behavior, the handcuffs. Then he saw the knife. Edwards knew he had to escape, and somehow he did. Barefoot and terrified, he ran through the streets of Milwaukee and flagged down 2 police officers. What he told them was chilling. But it was nothing compared to what they were about to see. The officers followed Edwards back to Dahmer's apartment at 924 North 25th Street. As they stepped inside, they were hit with an odor so foul, so unnatural, it made their stomachs turn. At first, Dahmer was calm, eerily calm. He tried to downplay everything. But when one officer opened the fridge, everything changed. Inside was the severed head of a black man staring back at him, frozen in death. That was just the beginning. What they found in Dahmer's apartment wasn't just evidence of murder. It was evidence of methodical, ritualistic horror. Multiple severed heads were discovered, some in the freezer, some in cabinets. There were jars containing preserved genitals. Human hearts and organs were neatly wrapped in plastic. A 57-gallon drum in the bedroom held decomposing torsos soaked in acid. Skulls were arranged on shelves like decorations. Hundreds of Polaroid photos showed naked bodies in various stages of dismemberment. This wasn't just a killer's lair. It was a house of horrors. News of the discovery exploded across the globe. The media dubbed him the Milwaukee Cannibal. Reporters couldn't keep up with the details. They were too gruesome, too surreal. People asked, how could this have gone on for so long? How did no one know? But the real question was, why did he do it? Dahmer didn't run. He didn't fight. He confessed everything within hours of his arrest. With chilling calm, he walked detectives through each murder, each experiment, each depraved fantasy. He admitted to killing 17 young men and boys between 1978 and 1991. He described how he would lure them, drug them, and kill them. But it didn't stop there. He told them about the necrophilia, the cannibalism, the desire to create submissive, sex zombies who would never leave him. His words weren't just disturbing, they were evil in its purest, most calculated form. The trial began in January 1992. Dahmer pled guilty but insane. His legal team argued that no sane man could do what he did, but the prosecution painted a different picture of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, who meticulously planned each step, who kept trophies not out of madness, but out of pleasure. The jury took just over 10 hours to decide. Dahmer was found legally sane and sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, 957 years behind bars. He was sent to Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. At first, he was kept away from other inmates for his own safety, but eventually, he was placed in general population. He reportedly found religion, was baptized, and even expressed remorse. Some believed him, others didn't. Could a man who had eaten human flesh, drilled into living skulls, and preserved body parts in his home really find redemption? That question was never answered. On November 28, 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer was beaten to death by a fellow inmate in a prison bathroom. Bludgeoned with a metal bar, his death was swift and brutal, the end of a life that had caused so much pain, fear, and devastation. Even decades later, the story of Jeffrey Dahmer continues to haunt America. He wasn't a monster hiding in the shadows. He was the man next door, the guy on the bus, the quiet co-worker. That's what made it so terrifying. How normal he looked, how ordinary he seemed. But behind that blank stare was a world of darkness that most of us can't even imagine. His story forces us to confront the darkest parts of human psychology and the horrifying truth that sometimes evil wears a friendly face. If this story shocked you, disturbed you, or made you think twice about what true evil looks like, then don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who thinks they've heard it all. Because the story of Jeffrey Dahmer is one you'll never forget.